So Susan, it's that time, a few minutes past, so I'm going to call the meeting to order.
Okay,
And would you do a roll call for me, please?
sure. Mr. Ha,
Yes.
and could you, I know that you guys are there, but the ones that are zooming, could you tell me where you're at? Mr. Peterson,
I'm here at my home at 575 8th Street.
Mr. Dantz,
Here.
At the airport.
yeah. Mr. Gentili. Mr. Gentili,
I am here in my office.
okay,
Manistee Township, Casino.
yeah. Ms. Goodman,
Here, City of Manistee, Manistee County.
Mr. Suda,
Here.
Mr. Suda, yep.
Here at the airport.
Yep, Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes, I'm here. I'm at my office on River Street.
Okay, thank you. Has everybody gotten the agenda for today's meeting and has a chance to review it? Any changes, adjustments to it that anybody might want to make or request? If not, I'll ask for a motion to approve it as is.
So moved.
Second?
Yeah.
Second,
Okay, roll call, Susan.
who was the second or the support?
Both Phil and Andrew, so I think Phil was actually first.
Okay. Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes,
Mr. Dantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
yes,
Ms. Goodman. Ms. Goodman,
Muted. Muted, Karen. She's got a
Got a
thumbs
thumbs
up.
up.
Okay.
Mr. Suda
Yes.
and Ms. Kaminsky.
Yes.
Okay, again, no public comment because we don't have any public here at the moment.
Is there any
And
online?
no one's on line
And
either.
no one's online. Okay, moving on to approval of last meeting minutes, April 19th, 2021 meeting minutes. I hope everybody's gotten a copy of it, had a chance to review it. I see nothing in there except on page 2 where we had where we're talking about accounts payable report and devotions or the motions and so on. It was supported by Mr. Kaminsky. I believe that should be Mrs. Kaminsky or
Okay.
Miss. So that's the only error I see in the minutes from last month. Any other comments?
Motion to approve as amended.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
second,
And who was that seconded?
Mr. Peterson,
Okay.
Couple, three
Su-
people.
Susan, could we have a vote on that, please? A roll call?
sure. Mr. Hawes,
Yes?
Mr. Peterson,
yes,
Mr. Dantz,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
yes,
Ms. Goodman,
Yes,
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky. Ms. Kaminsky,
Did you say Kaminsky?
yep,
Yes.
Okay, sorry, you cut out for a second. Yes.
okay.
That's it, right, Susan?
Yep,
Okay. Moving on, Treasury Report. I hope everyone has gotten a copy of the April 2021 Revenue and Expenses Report. Had a chance to review it. I have reviewed it myself. I don't see anything, but I do have a question. Susan, and you probably answer this.
Mhm.
On the revenue and expenses, where it says fuel sales for
Yeah.
April 2021,
Mhm.
says 119437. And then on the last page over here, there's fuel sales.
So the way that
Uh,
So the way that works is those revenues are what's actually recorded into the system. And so those will show up that it's always a month behind. So what you see
Oh,
is
okay.
there are actually the month before, because we don't
So
know
the-
what, that month's gonna do until the end of the month. So those are always running about a month behind.
So the 1194 showing up for April is actually March.
Right, yep.
Oh, okay. That was pretty confusing. I was working on that. Never noticed that before. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments on the April 2021 revenues and expenses? If not, could I have a motion to approve as presented?
Actually, could we start with the accounts payable? That's
Oh, I thought we
usually what
were.
we approve first, but it's not in that.
Oh,
order.
okay. Sorry about that. Let's back up a minute, folks, and go back to the April 2021 accounts payable. And I presume everybody has gotten a copy of that, has had a chance to review it. And if there's any comments, et cetera, voice the comments now. I see no comments from me. So if everybody's satisfied with what they're looking at, could I have a motion to approve the April 2021 accounts payable as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the April 2021 accounts payable as presented.
Okay,
I'll second.
Also,
so that was, Susan, there was a toss-up between,
Ms.
give it
Kaminsky.
Cindy.
okay, we're gonna give it to her.
Yep, for support.
Okay, sounds good. Susan, can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Mr. Hawes,
Yes,
Mr. Peterson,
Yes,
Mr. Dantz,
Yes,
Mr. Gentili,
Yes,
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
yes,
Ms. Kaminsky.
Yes,
Okay,
okay, now we're moving on to the April 2021 revenue and expenses, as well as the trial balance sheet and the other additional sheets attached, referring to Orchard Beach Aviation rent and also fuel sales. Everyone's had a chance to review it. Any comments? And you have all heard that I had one comment and learned what it was all about. So if everyone's okay with what we just talked about or presented here, could I have a motion to approve?
I'll make that motion. Karen Goodman.
Okay, thank you. Second it?
I'll second.
Phil is second, Susan.
okay.
Could I have a roll call, please?
Yep, Mr. Hawes,
Yes,
Mr. Peterson,
yes,
Mr. Dantz,
Yes,
Mr. Gentili,
yes,
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
yes,
Ms. Kaminsky.
yes.
okay. One thing before we move beyond the Treasury Report, I have a little note here and comes up from the previous meeting. Susan, this is to you. Are we clear with the audit where we had a 30-day delay on
So-
that?
So the auditor filed an extension for us, our second extension, which will be up May 31st. They're working on getting us a draft. I'm hoping to get a draft this week, no later than the beginning of next week, so we'll know where we're at.
Okay. Thank you. That was a curiosity. I had a note there. Okay, moving on. Committee reports and discussion. No executive committee meeting, no budget committee meeting, and we had kind of perhaps a pseudo capital projects committee meeting where the members of it, we kind of chatted back and forth between email and phone. And what we did talk about and decided to move forward on was a project that Phil had put together with respect to electric metering on some of the hangars out here. So I'm gonna turn it over to Phil to give a real quick recap of what was presented to us.
Well, I'll make it really kind of quick. As of right now, there's four separate meters out there, and each of them are paying $28.22 for an access charge. The proposed change is to have one meter, that would be a utility meter and customer owned for four of them, for the four of them that are there now, so that we could measure the amount of usage per tenant. And with that idea in mind, I would propose that we would, or I would suggest that we would change the rent from $175 per month to $200 per month. And with the access charge taken off of it, that's just about a wash for the tenant. As a matter of fact, probably a savings of like $3 per month, savings for the tenant. And the utility usage would be read by the airport staff here, and then it'd have to be calculated by Susan to figure out how much each person is responsible for. In the end, the bid that we got was $1,650, and it would pay for itself in about 2 years. And every 2 years, we'd basically make that $1,800 back. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Okay, anybody got any questions on that? I thought it was pretty straightforward, and Phil did a good job on recapping that for us.
Well, as far as reading the meter, that's done digitally now over internet, if I'm not mistaken, so.
Yeah, but if we have our own meters, they're analog.
Okay,
That's what the bid is for an analog meter, and that just basically, it's an older meter like what.
used to have.
Yeah, what we used to have.
So the real consumer's meter will be read automatically, but that's
Right.
just the one. And then the sub-meters, we will be responsible for.
You're a master electrician, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Phil is a master electrician, so he knows what he's talking about in this stuff, so. Just so, make sure everybody's aware of that, so.
Hope
If the master says so, I'll buy it.
Also had been an electrical inspector too, but I let that go. They wanted too much BS to keep that up, so, but whatever.
Okay.
So it
I
boils
think it's a good
down-
idea myself.
So it boils down to each tenant would be billed individually for their own usage then, right?
It's basically the same as it is now. You would be billed for your own usage. However, the usage now is done by the utility, and with the proposed change, the usage would be read by airport staff, and they would say, okay, so-and-so used X amount of, so many kilowatts of electricity this month, and then it would take a simple calculation to figure out, okay, how much is each kilowatt worth, and then multiply that out, and there you got it.
And the key there is that we save the meter charges, so we're, saving, was it $30 a month per meter that we're not using, so that's $90 a month, so.
Yep.
So we can recoup those savings to pay for the project and still, not make the tenants any worse off than they currently are.
Barry, it's kind of like, the way I picture it, it's like our water bill in the city. You have a service-ready charge for your water meter, and your water meter is you're charged that whether you use any water through that meter or not each month. And based on the capacity of that meter, you get charged more or less. So if you got a big meter that, well, allows 10,000 gallons a month per minute to go through it, you're gonna be charged a whole lot more than the one that does 1,000 gallons per minute through it. Kinda like the same concept, Phil?
Yeah, I would say that, that'd be a good guess, yes.
We, based on what it was and the cost of this, Barry and I talked, and the other members of the group talked, and we just said, Barry, go ahead and implement this and move it on forward, because the bid for this work by the contractor was coming due, I think, in a couple more days. So we went forward without asking a bid from approval from the board.
And it's
So-
within my spending authority, so.
So I felt pretty confident that everybody would approve it anyway, so we went forward with it just to get moving on something. Okay. Any questions, comments? And thank you, Andrew, for your input. Okay, moving on to Barry Spark, Airport Director.
Okay,
Yours, Barry.
I will also take this opportunity to introduce our guest.
Okay.
everyone.
I'll let you introduce him, Matt.
Hi, I'm Matt Reinhardt, and I'm the Managing Director with Cape Air. I
Oh,
oversee
okay.
the Midwest region. I just literally arrived a couple minutes ago,
All right.
but great to be here with all of you.
Good.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, well, thrilled to be here in Manistee for our ribbon cutting today, and to talk about the success so far of the service. We're going to 4 round trips a day today, and
All right.
5 on Sunday. So we're really looking forward to continue to increase that ridership as we go into the prime summer months.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
That almost gave me enough time to switch Zoom around, get my screen shared up. Okay, fortunately, this is gonna be a quick meeting, so everything will align for the ribbon cutting. I don't have anything, that's in-depth to go into this month. A lot of no updates, but starting off with no incidents or accidents to report during the month. It was kind of discussed before the meeting that, another EAS airport in Michigan did have, kind of an incident this past month. An aircraft on Boutique Air, departing from Minneapolis up to Ironwood, lost a door on the takeoff run. So fortunately, those are not the type of incidents that we have to deal with Cape Air. So, I actually had a call this morning with Andrew Bonney, my regular check-in with him, and I shared with him that the types of problems that we're discussing are problems because we're being successful, lots of passengers, and those are good problems to have to deal with as opposed to other issues. So, the local revenue sharing board grants that we have in for the security camera system, that next meeting happens in June, where we'll find out whether we will be successful in that request. The sheriff and I have not touched base yet on moving forward with the law enforcement officer coverage here at the airport. I mentioned last month that I'd been notified of an upcoming state inspection of our fuel system. I haven't heard back from them as to when that will be scheduled. And then last month, related to that, is the authority approved the quote to replace the fuel system monitor. I've called, we're on their work list, but we don't have a scheduled install date yet. I think we're waiting on the parts to come in. So, other things that have occurred in the last month, just in general, is we had a virtual FAA Part 139 records inspection. This is the first inspection I've had since the beginning of COVID. So we're on an 18-month inspection schedule, and our last inspection was in December of 19. So we're basically coming up towards the end of that 18-month period. So they got the records inspection done, a lot of scanning and sending things into them. There is one item that came out as being flagged, and the term here is NOTAM, which is an abbreviation for Notice to Airmen. It is basically the system that pilots, airports, air traffic control use to communicate information. So anything that the airport needs to communicate out to the aviation community, we do through issuing these NOTAMs. And we've had a piece of equipment, our HAPPY lighting system, which is precision air something indicator. Don't remember what that acronym is right now. That's been out for a while, and we've been waiting to get it flight checked by the FAA to recertify it. And last summer, that NOTAMs can't be issued indefinitely, so something that's out for an extended period of time, you have to periodically reissue it. And if there's a gap in those issuances, that's something that's flagged. And we had a gap of 3 weeks, which occurred around the time that our employee, the employee that we lost last summer, it happened the day, it was supposed to be renewed the day after we lost him, so that it was just not a good time. So, but in going through the exit interview on that, there were some other good suggestions for improvements on our record keeping. I'm working with staff over the next month to implement those and put together a response to the FAA. The second half of the inspection will actually be an on-site airfield inspection where they actually look at the airfield, and that is tentatively scheduled for the time frame of August or September later this summer. So, you know, overall, not a perfect inspection, but overall nothing significantly flagged either.
Good.
An update then on the township zoning issues that I've been talking about now for the last few months. Mr. Ha and I met with our attorney per the board's direction last month, and I presented, kind of pulled together all the information I had for him and tried to bring him up to speed. A week after that meeting, the Manistee Township Planning Commission held a work session on their new master plan, and I attended that, and to the extent I could, attempted to answer some of their questions. But really at this point, both the Planning Commission and myself on the airport side really see this as being in the hands of our respective attorneys, Richard Wilson and George Saylor, who work for the same law firm, so there's, you know, high bandwidth communication that can happen there, and they're really trying to get their hands or heads around what all these issues are as it relates to the new master plan that the township is trying to put together. So I think it is in good hands now. I think the right people are at the table asking the right questions, and it's just a matter of getting those details sorted out. So that's my update on that. Moving on then to emplanements and on-time percentage, completion percentage for last month. So in April, we had a total of 616 passengers come in on the airline, which if you go back, obviously better than the 11 a year ago in April. But getting back to pre-COVID, you know, 400, 400, 500, 500, you'll see that that number of 616 is bigger than the other numbers I'm reporting here. Actually, that ended up being our third best April ever. We were 5 passengers short of being the second best April ever. And that second best April was 1969.
Wow.
So you got to go back a long ways. Now, obviously, the best April was the year Frontier was here, 2011, a decade ago. So we'll always be fighting against being number 2 until we can get to, you know, a significantly higher enplanement standpoint. But we are really, you know, coming out of COVID, doing very, very well, you know, being better than any of our last 10 years and really going back practically 50 years.
Barry, was that North Central at the time?
That would have been North Central in
Okay.
69, yes.
Wow.
On-time performance, improved, so we went from 76% to 81%. And again, these are my numbers. Cape Air's numbers are slightly different. They were a little bit higher for my call this morning. But the good news is the cancellations, there was, you know, only a 2% cancellation rate for the month of April. You know, the delays were, you know, the area that we've been focusing on. We're still on the higher side, but we're making good progress. You see the last, you know, 3-4 months, you know, that is there, you can see that improvement there. Part of that is we're getting out of winter where we tend to have more issues. But part of it is also just other things Cape Air is doing to improve operations, as I'm kind of drilling in on this. Any questions on either the enplanements or the on-time performance numbers?
Barry, the on-time performance, this is Karen.
Yes.
Now can you remind me, is that departure and arrival, or?
What I capture is both, and it is basically within 15 minutes of schedule. So, and again, most of these tend to be, you know, more the 30-minute delay as opposed to the, you know, multiple hour delay. So because that's still technically outside of that 15-minute window, but they, you know, are less likely to impact passengers on a connection standpoint.
Sure. And do you see a difference between the on-time leaving versus on-time arrivals?
I really can't say specifically for April because I haven't dug into that. But in looking at the March numbers, where I did look into that some more, the flight that was the problem was the first flight out in the morning. And that's really where the focus has been to make the improvements there.
So what was the drill down on that? I mean, you were able to find that was the first flight of the morning. I'm wondering because we're in their flight path. I can hear them going over in the mornings. So I just wondered, you know, it's like, so what is the delay in the mornings, and what have we done?
You maybe answer that.
Yeah, well, I think
on the other side,
I think it was a
focusing on
mix.
that.
Some of it was certainly weather and de-icing and just everything that goes with weather. I think part of it was also our crews just making sure that we had a good timeline in place to ensure that on-time push, particularly on that first flight of the morning. And then also working with the crews to ensure that we were really watching the time of our TSA opening and the screening of passengers, and to make sure that any kind of holdups that were to occur during that screening process was quickly solved, so that was not tying up our departure. So it's really a mix of multiple factors, and primarily just focus overall by our entire airport team and crews here to ensure that number improved.
Great. I cannot see who is talking.
Hi, this is Matt Reinhardt. I'm with Cape Air.
And
Oh, great.
unfortunately,
Okay.
Am I off the camera?
Because
I think
you're
I'm-
Well,
behind the bill.
it's just really far away. I wasn't sure who. I can see somebody sitting back there, but
Karen,
Great.
he
Well-
popped in about 45
I
minutes
just
ago,
arrived.
visiting us today for the ribbon
Great.
cutting.
great. Well, thank you, and thank you for the answers.
Thank you.
Okay, I will move on then. Trying to get this in an orientation that actually people can see. So this is the airfare report for June travel. These fares were basically collected last Friday. And it's actually, from my perspective, a really fascinating report because it shows things that I've probably never seen before. But I think as we come out of the pandemic and we go from completely abnormal situation to approaching more normality, we're gonna see some of these things where just things are weird. So what's really weird about this is Traverse City on average is the least expensive airport, and Grand Rapids is like more expensive than Traverse City by $20 on average, which that's never occurred. In the 10 years that I've been looking, following this, that Traverse City is the least expensive ahead of Grand Rapids. What is actually so further fascinating is the range here from that lowest Traverse City up to us. We're this month the highest, but that range is less than $40, which that's never been that narrow of a range. Again, typically I would expect to see Grand Rapids cheapest because they always are. Usually we're number 2, Traverse City number 3, and Muskegon being the highest. Muskegon came down, well, they didn't come down, but they didn't really go up. So the change from last month is they went up $11, and we in Traverse City went up 50, and Grand Rapids went up 90. So United out of Muskegon is, for whatever reason this month, giving Muskegon some love. But it's really fascinating to see that there is this really very close spread, which really, indicates that people should be looking at their local airports right now because they're going to get good fares and not having to drive 2 or more hours elsewhere. And so if you look, things that are highlighted, so Traverse City has the most lowest fares in the bunch. Muskegon is actually second, Grand Rapids third. We only nabbed 2, our fare to Chicago and then San Diego. So interesting, very interesting stuff. And again, because we're the only airport that doesn't charge for parking in this set of airports, if you include some parking in it, that then shifts everything greatly into our favor. And if you value your parking dollar and you value your time, even though we're technically the most expensive by a little bit, we come out in the long run being a great deal when you consider all of those other less tangible items other than just the airfare. So overall, I'm happy. And again, I've been a little concerned as we kind of come out of COVID and start returning to more normal airfares that we would kind of see something that we might not like, but that's not surfacing yet. The one thing I will add is you may say, well, why is Traverse City so cheap? I think that's actually a byproduct of the major airline strategy right now. I mean, they are adding capacity to destinations that are non-urban that they believe people will want to get away to this summer. National parks across the country have received a lot of increased service. And Traverse City, if you've been following kind of the news, they now have a nonstop from Boston. They've also been kind of on the recipient edge of that. And when you add all that capacity, if it's not filling up as quickly as you want, well, then fares, come low to try to boost the sales of that excess capacity. So I think that's really why Traverse City is where it is relative to Grand Rapids. Any questions on airfares?
Barry, this is Andrew. I think I mentioned this a couple months ago that I was noticing a trend in Southwest. And over the next couple of months, I'm actually going to be flying out of Manistee because Southwest out of Grand Rapids has gotten kind of insane. And United, I can actually fly first class out of Chicago on United cheaper than on Southwest out of Grand Rapids over the next few months.
Good deal.
That is very interesting.
I have a quick question, Barry, on the
Yes.
airfares.
Yep.
I don't know what dates you're looking at or how far out you were booking just to see what the fares were.
Generally, so I'll answer that quickly. Sorry to interrupt, but generally I'm looking about a month out, so that's mid-June. So they were pulled last Friday, for basically mid-June travel.
Okay. This question is, are those regular airfares or were they the basic economy?
It depends. They're generally the lowest listed. So if there is a basic economy, that will show up. Generally, the Cape Air Interline and or code share will not be basic economy just because those fares don't match up the way the systems work. So there is kind of that added benefit that Cape Air Manistee fare probably is a slightly better flight than what you're comparing coming out of the other airports. But that can be very subjective depending on the circumstance.
Right. But I was just curious because that would be a plus for Manistee if the other ones were the basic economies.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing it up, and being in the travel industry, you're on top of that.
Okay.
Okay, moving on then. So, quick updates on our capital improvement projects. So our airport layout plan update, it's continuing. I talked to Prina Newhoff last week. They're working through the stuff they're working through. I don't really have any additional update on that. As it relates to our PFAS testing and contamination and all of the things around that, I think it was in March where I had presented kind of the draft or the results from the first phase of testing that was done. Last month I mentioned that we had a meeting with Eagle, Department of Energy, Great Lakes, or Environment and Great Lakes and Energy. And out of that, they requested a phase 2 work plan, which the consultants delivered last week. And the next step from Eagle is they schedule kind of a public briefing on this, for lack of a better word. I'm not sure what they call it, where they invite the local units of government, so the cities being invited to that. I'm assuming the county and eventually the township will be invited to that, where they basically are notifying that there is now a new official contamination site in this geographic area. So that's kind of the next step is, I think technically we're already on the state's website as a site, but this is kind of the formal announcement to local entities. I've been working with the city on this for years, so they know of this because the city has a water well on the airport property. So, nothing new there, but, depending on what news agencies may get wind of that, it could, generate some publicity that we would, respond to appropriately.
I'm guessing these wells that they drilled, these test wells, are at a much shallower depth than what the city water well is at?
Much
How
more.
much? What's the difference?
I don't know what the city's well is at. These test wells were down to like 30 feet.
I'm gonna say the city must be at least 200, Jeff.
That's what I
200
would
plus.
think, but I actually
Well,
don't know.
usually you gotta go deeper for a bigger aquifer,
Right,
for the
right,
size
right.
pump they've got.
And if you recall from the phase 1 work, given where our site is and given the direction of the surface and, subsurface flows, it's flowing, not towards the city well. But that is one thing the state asked in phase 2, is that there be an additional test well between those two. Okay, Cape Air service updates. And again, I already touched on some of this when talking about the employment numbers. But overall, things are going well. On-time performance is improving. We are dealing with some, issues or concerns around weight restrictions on the aircraft, leading to instances of passengers getting bumped and or baggage getting bumped. And I know Matt is well aware of all of those going on. Fortunately, for the next 4 weeks, we kind of have a reprieve as we basically go from having 2 flights a day to 4 flights a day, but our demand doesn't double overnight. We'll be back to that level by the end of June, but really for the next 4 weeks, we'll actually be really in good shape to not have any service issues, knock on wood.
Good.
So, and this is where I, kind of show those numbers, for April. So 2011 Frontier, 1,193 passengers. Number 2 April, 621, 1969, and then we're right behind 5 short with 616 April this year. I was really thinking we could do it, but
that's still impressive.
You're very
Yeah.
impressive.
Oh, no,
All planes we've got, that's,
And 2 frequencies per day.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. Yep.
right.
And also coming out of last year.
Yeah, I mean, and
Yeah,
And we're not completely out of
nationwide,
it.
we're still about
Right.
2/3 to 70% of pre-pandemic
still
numbers
climbing,
nationwide.
right.
So, things
Right.
are, and, well, I'll actually touch on some of this.
Okay.
My next slide. Already mentioned 2% canceled flights. May is also looking very good. I think we'll be kind of in that same point, our 3rd best May ever. I'm projecting about 800 total passengers for May right now, given the booking rates, given we've got about 2 weeks left. 840 would give us, the number 2 place. So I think we're gonna fall a little bit short of that. But again, very consistent, good growth given where we are. And then the other good thing is that advanced bookings going out through June, July, August, and even into September are all ahead of where we were pre-pandemic 2019. So we're, not only are we doing well in the near term, people are booking out, and that's a departure of where things were through last summer, fall, and the spring, where under the pandemic, most travel decisions were made very close in and people weren't committing out into the future. And that's changed, and we've caught up and surpassed where we were. This item, so last month I had mentioned that the plan was to update our capacity to being able to serve 9 passengers starting June 10th, with that plan through September 30th. That's been pulled back, so we're staying at a cap of 8 seats. And, this kind of arose out of concerns of, even at 8, that we've been bumping passengers occasionally. And, I've been having this conversation with Cape Air. I know the station staff here has voiced concerns to me, so I'm sure Matt's heard it from them too. And right at this point, we're continuing to discuss and monitor the situation. My call this morning with Andrew Bonney was on this topic. And what is interesting, or not surprising, but interesting, is a common theme on flights where we are overweight tends to be golf clubs. When you have 6 passengers booked on a 8-passenger flight with 6 sets of golf clubs, that puts you in a very bad position to be starting from. But it's a really challenging dynamic, because those golfers probably want their golf clubs with them much more importantly than their clothes or anything else they're bringing. So figuring out the dynamics of how to deal with that situation is there's discussions happening around that. And, it's clearly in everybody's interest to get to 9 seats, because that's, a 13% increase over 8. It leads to more enplanements, which is something we really look forward to. it leads to more revenues, which is something Cape Air and, we consider important. So, everyone's doing what they can to figure out the dynamics of the Manistee market. We are a little bit longer of a segment than many of their routes. So that means additional fuel needs to be carried. If there's inclement weather in Chicago or the potential, then you have to carry even extra fuel in case you had to go to an alternate airport. So all of those factors, come into play. But it is on everybody's radar and lots of conversations are happening. So that's kind of the update there that I wanted to give to the board. Car rental update. Unfortunately, all the things I was hoping for that sounded good are falling apart because of just where the car market is right now. So I had a conversation finally this past month with Victorian Carport because they had reached out to me, late winter, early spring, and said were interested. But even if you drive by there, they've got like 5 cars left.
They were almost empty yesterday.
There is a shortage in the rental car or the used car market. So they can't, stock up to then supply cars for rentals. And the same thing, I had mentioned last month that Watson's Manistee had initially indicated that they were planning on renting 5 vehicles. I've reached out to them recently and I'm not getting any response, so I am believing that the new car shortage is, causing the same issue on their side.
They're waiting for the chips, Barry.
So that leaves us with 6 vehicles from our, historic provider. Cape Air was using one of those and actually still is for a couple more weeks, and we've told them they basically need to find other arrangements, that we can't take one of our 6 vehicles and allocate it to them for the summer. So they're looking at leasing or some other longer-term arrangement with somebody to have a vehicle for their crews. And internally, we're kind of allocating some vehicles to our general aviation traffic versus airline customers, because airline customers tend to book farther out in advance, but GA traffic tends to be kind of within the week. And, having, a multi-million-dollar jet come in here with, a bunch of passengers and then to tell them, oh, and there's nothing you can do to get transportation. So we're trying to balance that mix and kind of allocating some, day of, if that's still available, we got a airline passenger that needs something, we'll, release that. But we're trying to kind of balance those competing needs just because of the time frame in which they book is different. Marketing update. Obviously, you all know about the ribbon cutting today after this meeting. The bi-monthly marketing meetings with Aaron, Cape Air's head of marketing, are continuing. Cape Air has now hired, and the new person starts, and I don't know her name yet, but for the Midwest region. So we will start interacting with a new person next month, I believe.
Correct, yeah, Stacy.
Stacy, thank you. We're continuing monthly Facebook contests, basically awarding a pair of tickets to generate excitement through Facebook and social media. We, I believe, started last week some out-of-state digital marketing, which is not something we've ever done before. We've only, well, Chicago is technically out of state, but, connecting beyond that, markets like Denver, et cetera, we're doing some very highly targeted digital marketing to people in those markets that have connections to Manistee. And then just a reminder that this is our 60th year of commercial air service, and we haven't really promoted that yet, but we're trying to figure out our plans of kind of making that a bigger thing as we go forward through the rest of the year. And that is my report.
Oh, one question, Barry.
Yes.
On PFAS and the potential public meeting, any idea when that might be from Eagle?
I believe it is next week. I actually meant to look up the date. It's somewhere on my calendar, but I forgot to look it up before the meeting. But I believe it's next week.
And you don't know where the location would be in town?
Given it's the state, I'm sure it will be virtual.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, well, thank you, Barry.
Okay.
Any other questions, for Barry? If not, we'll move on. Oh, yeah, I do have one more question, Barry. We talked about, memo for parking out here. Have you had a chance to move
I have
on
not
that?
put together that parking plan
Okay.
yet. But the pieces that we kind of had talked about, airport staff are no longer parking in the prime spots here next to the terminal, so we're parking, out. So,
The dynamics.
some of the things have been implemented even though the full plan hasn't been put together.
Good. Okay, moving on, old business, unfinished business. I just might mention, where Barry mentioned that he and I went down to see George reference the Manistee Township zoning situation and so on. I also presented some material to George, reference our photos that we ran across a couple, 3 months ago. And, haven't got a response back from him yet on that. I did give him a call a week ago, and so I'm gonna have to follow up a few more times before I get any, results on that. I'm not aware of any new business at the moment, unless somebody's got some new business they wanna add to the program today. Okay, moving on to comments by board members.
I have just one thing. Susan, I'll send you a copy of the supportive evidence that I had put together for the meter change on the hangars. That should explain a number of things. And then after you get that, if you have any questions, you can just contact me. But I'll get that to you here in the next day or two.
Okay. I'm assuming
Okay,
that,
thank you.
I'm assuming with the change for that, when are you expecting that?
I don't know, Barry.
I don't know when we'll get scheduled, for that, probably sometime this summer, but
I would say August,
Because for the
probably
ones,
August at the earliest, yeah.
because for the ones that are affected, you said there should be a letter sent to them explaining that. Because
Yep.
we'll be changing their rent and stuff, so, okay.
Any other comments by board members? If not, we'll call it adjournment for this meeting. Thank you. And now we'll step out for the ribbon cutting.
we got
Half an
35
hour.
minutes.
Yeah, we made it.
That's a lot of ribbons.
Yeah.